The Waffen-SS remains one of the most controversial and complex military formations of the Second World War. Initially formed as an elite bodyguard for Adolf Hitler, it evolved into a vast and multinational force, encompassing hundreds of thousands of volunteers and conscripts from across Europe. Revered by some for its combat effectiveness, condemned by others for its association with war crimes and ideological extremism, the Waffen-SS stood at the intersection of military ambition and political fanaticism. In this comprehensive documentary, we examine the complete history of the Waffen-SS, from its origins in the early years of the Third Reich through its battlefield campaigns across Europe and the Soviet Union to its final collapse in 1945 and its lesser-known origins. With a focus on both its organizational development and its role in some of history's most brutal conflicts, this film seeks to provide a clear and factual account of a force that has long been subject to both myth and controversy. My name is Finn, and liking and subscribing helps the channel a ton. This video is the full story of the Waffen-SS, told in detail without embellishment and grounded in history. Adolf Hitler, shaped by his early experience with the Sturmabteilung, the Storm Detachment, had grown cautious of large paramilitary groups that could operate independently. While the SA had once been vital to the Nazi Party's rise, Hitler saw its growing numbers and unruly behavior as a threat to his authority. After coming to power in 1933, he increasingly relied on the Schutzstaffel, the protection squadron, a smaller, more disciplined organization that he could control directly. This group would eventually grow into a powerful force within the German state. The military foundation of what became the Waffen-SS developed from two key formations: the SS-Verfügungstruppe, known as the dispositional troops, and the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, originally created as Hitler's personal bodyguard. These units started as tight-knit security formations, composed of men selected for their loyalty and toughness. The SS began with just a few men, Hitler recalled. We gathered the toughest ones. To distinguish themselves from the brown uniforms of the SA, the SS adopted black uniforms and focused on discipline, loyalty, and hierarchy. Early SS leadership passed through several hands. Josef Berchtold and Erhard Heiden both held command, but it was in 1929 that Heinrich Himmler took control and began to expand the SS into a much broader organization. Though Himmler had no combat experience, having only served briefly as a junior officer trainee at the end of the First World War, he was a capable administrator. He built the SS into a structured system with separate branches handling security, intelligence, internal policing, and later military operations. Among the prominent figures in the early SS was Josef Sepp Dietrich, a longtime associate of Hitler. Dietrich would later command several of the most important Waffen-SS divisions during the war. Other men like Gottlob Berger and Friedrich Wilhelm Krüger moved between the SA and SS in the early years, reflecting the fluid nature of the Nazi Party's power structure. Berger had previously expressed loyalty to the SA, but later played a key role in recruiting for the Waffen-SS. By the end of 1930, the combined ranks of the SA and SS had grown to over 100,000 men, making them larger than the official German army, which remained restricted by the Treaty of Versailles. Although the SS was technically subordinate to Ernst Röhm, head of the SA, it increasingly reported directly to Hitler. Röhm envisioned the SA as the foundation of a new revolutionary army. Hitler disagreed. He saw the SA as a potential liability and instead placed his confidence in the SS, which he viewed as more controlled and politically reliable. In 1931, Himmler began defining the SS's identity more formally. Speaking to recruits, he emphasized the long tradition of elite guards in history, the bodyguards of Caesar, Napoleon, and Frederick the Great. There has always been a guard, Himmler told them, and the guard of the new Germany will be the SS. At that point, the SA had more than 400,000 members, while the SS had only 52,000. Most members of both groups were not officially armed, though some carried clubs or pistols, and violence between rival political factions was common. After the Nazis assumed power, large SA parades raised concerns among the military leadership. Hitler feared Rome might attempt a coup. In June 1934, the crisis came to a head. What followed was known as the Night of the Long Knives. Rome and dozens of SA leaders were arrested and executed by SS personnel. Among those involved were Theodor Eicke, then commandant of the Dachau concentration camp, and his assistant Michael Lippert. Himmler, working alongside Dietrich, coordinated the arrest of roughly 150 more SA officers. On July 13, 1934, Hitler addressed the Reichstag and announced that 61 people had been executed. He stated that 13 had died resisting arrest and 3 had committed suicide. Other estimates, however, place the number of deaths at well over 1,000. The SA was not dissolved completely, but its power was severely reduced. From that moment forward, the SS became the dominant force within the Nazi paramilitary structure. Although Hitler allowed the German army to oversee some aspects of SS recruitment, the Waffen-SS began developing independently. In 1935, Hitler gave verbal approval that in the event of war, the dispositional troops of the SS would be incorporated into the army. However, he also believed that the SS should remain a distinct force in peacetime, one that operated independently from both the regular army and the police. By 1938, Hitler declared that the SS's military units should be treated as a standing armed force. In 1940, they were officially renamed as the Waffen-SS, the Armed SS. Hitler saw this as a way to build a loyal counterbalance to the regular army, which he never fully trusted. To develop these units into a functional military force, experienced army officers were brought in. General Paul Hauser, a respected veteran of the First World War, was placed in charge of training and organization. He founded 2 officer schools, one in Bad Tölz and one in Braunschweig. General Heinz Guderian later described Hauser as a capable and principled soldier. Another key figure was Felix Steiner, who had commanded an SS regiment before the war and had served as a junior officer in the First World War. Steiner emphasized flexibility and aggressive tactics, incorporating assault troop principles from 1918. The Leibstandarte, Hitler's original bodyguard unit, became a full combat division under Dietrich's leadership. Das Reich was formed from the earlier dispositional troops, and more divisions followed. These units formed the core of what would become Himmler's military force, a parallel army equipped with tanks, artillery, and support units. A major source of recruitment came from the Hitlerjugend, the Hitler Youth, and its junior division, the Jungvolk. These organizations became mandatory for German children and teenagers by the mid-1930s. At first, many believed they were joining a patriotic youth group. But training soon included marching drills, field exercises, and military instruction. By 1939, over 7.7 million young people were enrolled. When they turned 17, many were encouraged to join the Waffen-SS. A new law that year made military conscription universal, formalizing the system. The head of the Hitler Youth, Baldur von Schirach, answered directly to Hitler. He had partial American heritage. His great-grandfather had served as a Union officer during the American Civil War. Journalist William Shirer later described von Schirach as the dictator of youth in Germany. His organization absorbed all other youth groups in the country and created a pipeline into both the army and the Waffen-SS. Alongside military development, Himmler also extended SS influence over internal security. With support from Reinhard Heydrich, he merged the various regional police forces into a single national system. This included the criminal police, the Gestapo, and the security service. The SS now had direct control over Germany's law enforcement institutions. This centralization helped establish a highly authoritarian state and reduced opposition within the country. It's important to understand that the SS was not a single organization. The Waffen-SS was its military branch, composed of frontline combat troops. The Allgemeine SS, or General SS, performed internal political and ceremonial duties. The Sicherheitsdienst handled intelligence, and the Gestapo focused on state security. Another group, the Totenkopf-Verbände, the Death's Head units, were responsible for managing concentration camps in occupied territories. In 1939, ordered younger members of these units to be transferred into field divisions, creating personnel overlap between the SS's military and administrative branches. As the war continued, Himmler and Gottlob Berger faced obstacles to expanding the Waffen-SS inside Germany. Recruitment quotas and resistance from the army limited their options. To solve this, Berger proposed looking beyond Germany's borders. On August 7, 1940, he formally suggested the SS begin recruiting from Allied and occupied nations, a move that would soon transform the Waffen-SS into a multinational force. Gottlob Berger, responsible for recruitment under Heinrich Himmler, argued that expanding the Waffen-SS would not conflict with the needs of the other branches of the armed forces, as long as new recruits came from parts of the population not already assigned to the regular German army. This approach, he suggested, would remain the responsibility of the SS leadership. However, not everyone welcomed this idea. Theodor Eicke, who commanded the Totenkopf division, initially formed from personnel of the SS's concentration camp guard units, strongly resisted many of the new recruits being sent his way. He complained that many of them had criminal backgrounds or did not meet the strict racial and disciplinary standards expected within the SS. Eventually, Himmler overruled Eicke. In April 1941, he ordered that the Totenkopf formations were to be fully integrated into the Waffen-SS. Hitler saw the SS as uniquely loyal to him. He personally gave them their motto, "My honor is loyalty." In December 1941, he told party officials that his 6 SS divisions were composed of men who had no religious concerns and who faced death with complete composure. He was determined that the Waffen-SS remain an elite force. In early 1942, Hitler cautioned against expanding it too rapidly, explaining that such troops must suffer higher losses in battle to discourage those who were only interested in the prestige of the uniform. He emphasized that the SS should be selective and viewed it as a future leadership class. He considered recruits from Scandinavia to be racially suitable for inclusion. In an unusual aside, Hitler, who in his youth had enjoyed wearing shorts, joked in 1942 about forming SS guard units dressed in leather shorts. He imagined that such a uniform could be worn by soldiers regardless of where they came from, north or south. Later that year, he again mentioned forming a so-called Highland Brigade in leather shorts. Nothing came of the idea. Over the course of the war, the Waffen-SS raised, at least on paper, 38 divisions. Total manpower eventually reached approximately 910,000 men. Despite this size, the Waffen-SS never amounted to more than around 10% of the total strength of the German armed forces. Many officers in the traditional army viewed its expansion critically. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein later remarked that the formation of politically motivated SS divisions had wasted valuable manpower. Major General Friedrich von Mellenthin similarly criticized the concept, calling it a misguided attempt at divide and rule policy. In their view, the creation of a separate force served more to maintain political control than to strengthen overall military capacity. Of the Waffen-SS divisions, 7 were fully equipped armoured divisions and 8 were motorised infantry divisions known as Panzergrenadiers. The most well-known armoured divisions were the 1st SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, the 2nd SS Das Reich, and the 12th SS Hitler Youth Division. Others, such as the 5th SS Viking, the 9th SS Hohenstaufen, and the 10th SS Frundsberg, also became recognized for their battlefield performance. the Third SS Totenkopf Division remained less publicized, partly due to its origins in the concentration camp system. Several Panzer Grenadier divisions included the 4th SS Police Division, the 16th SS Reichsführer Division, which was active in Italy, the 11th SS Nordland, and the 17th SS Götz von Berlichingen, which took part in the Normandy campaign. Other divisions included the 18th SS Horst Wessel, the 23rd SS Nederland, and the 28th SS Wallonien. Some of these divisions, especially the latter, were never larger than regiment size. Typically, these divisions had one tank battalion and one assault gun battalion. It's also important to note that the Waffen-SS was not the only part of the regime with politically loyal troops. In early 1933, Hermann Göring, who was then Interior Minister of Prussia, created his own paramilitary force, an auxiliary police unit numbering around 50,000 men, many of whom came from the SA and SS. Later, as head of the German Air Force, Göring continued to attract motivated recruits, particularly from among the Hitler Youth. The Luftwaffe never had difficulty filling its ranks. However, after the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe had more ground personnel than it could use. By mid-1942, there were around 170,000 surplus ground crew. Attempts by the army to absorb these men as infantry replacements failed. Göring resisted transferring them, arguing that these were loyal National Socialist men who should not be exposed to the army's older officer corps or religious traditions. As a result, he created 22 field divisions under the control of the Luftwaffe. These formations were understrength and poorly suited for ground combat. Many could have been used to reinforce exhausted army formations on the Eastern Front, but instead became a separate structure that lacked coordination and effectiveness. German losses on the Eastern Front by early 1942 had already exceeded 1.6 million men, not including the sick or wounded. The demands on manpower increased steadily. The Army, Navy, Air Force, Waffen-SS and the Reich Labour Service all competed for the same limited pool of eligible men. The Luftwaffe also formed airborne divisions that eventually served as infantry. Many of these late war formations were never fully equipped or staffed. As the war progressed, the Waffen-SS became associated with an elite reputation. Himmler promoted this image through the SS newspaper Das Schwarze Korps, the Black Corps, and through regular coverage in the Nazi Party's main paper, the Völkischer Beobachter. By 1944, the former had a weekly circulation of 750,000, while the latter reached 1.7 million daily. This publicity contributed to the mythologizing of the Waffen-SS, placing them in the same category as famous historical warrior groups such as the Spartans, Roman Praetorian Guard, and Viking raiders. In reality, this reputation was largely built on the performance of a few select divisions, primarily those made up of German-born personnel. Many Waffen-SS formations consisted of very young recruits from the Hitler Youth and the Reich Labour Service. While a few early divisions were known for discipline and combat effectiveness, this was often a result of intense selection and training processes tied to ideological expectations. As a result, some units operated with a level of political fanaticism that frequently influenced their conduct in the field. The development of Waffen-SS armoured divisions was not only about politics. By 1943, Germany's strategic situation had worsened considerably. Following the defeats at El Alamein, the Allied landings in North Africa, and the loss at Stalingrad, Germany urgently needed more mobile, mechanized forces. During this time, the Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf divisions were reorganized as armored infantry formations with integral tank battalions. General Heinz Guderian, appointed Inspector General of Armored Troops in early 1943, was placed in charge of overseeing both Army and Waffen-SS tank units. Working with Armaments Minister Albert Speer, Guderian helped standardize weapons production. This ended the previous practice of developing separate supply systems. From this point onward, Waffen-SS divisions began receiving new tanks and armoured vehicles, including the Tiger and Panther models, often before regular army units. By 1944, a standard Waffen-SS Panzer division consisted of up to 15,000 frontline troops and around 6,000 support personnel. Its basic structure included a tank regiment, 2 mechanized infantry regiments, and an artillery regiment, along with supporting anti-tank, assault gun, flak, pioneer, reconnaissance, and signals units. Each tank regiment could field around 2,000 men, with 2 battalions made up of 4 companies each. These typically operated about 15 tanks per company. The divisions also included self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicles such as the Mobilwagen, Wirbelwind, and Ostwind, in response to growing Allied air superiority. The assault gun battalions were smaller, usually composed of 3 companies with around 20 Sturmgeschütz 3 or 4 vehicles and roughly 300 men. The anti-tank units had a mix of mobile tank destroyers like the Jagdpanzer IV and towed guns such as the 75mm Pak 40. Reconnaissance and pioneer battalions often exceeded 1,000 men, equipped with mobile artillery and light anti-aircraft systems. Each mechanized infantry regiment included 3 battalions and numbered close to 4,000 men. Their transport was provided by Schützenpanzerwagen, 251 armoured half-tracks. For support, they had 150mm Hummel artillery vehicles, 105mm Wespe vehicles, flamethrower carriers, and heavy mortar carriers. Anti-aircraft battalions were divided into 5 companies, 3 equipped with light 20mm guns and 2 with heavier 88mm guns. Artillery regiments within the SS Panzer divisions included 4 battalions, each with 3 batteries. 1 battery per battalion had self-propelled artillery, while the others used towed pieces. By late 1944, rocket launcher battalions equipped with Nebelwerfer systems were also added. These consisted of 3 companies with 150mm launchers and 1 with 210mm launchers, either towed or mounted on half-tracks. Tiger 1 and 2 heavy tanks were not part of standard SS division structure. Instead, they were grouped into independent heavy tank battalions. In 1944, the 1st SS Panzer Corps operating in the West was supported by Heavy Tank Battalion 101, which carried the insignia of crossed keys and oak leaves to symbolize its link with the Leibstandarte. It often operated alongside the Hitler Youth Division. Battalions 102 and 103 supported the 2nd SS Panzer Corps and the Germanic SS Corps on the Eastern Front. As new Tiger II tanks arrived, the battalions were renumbered as 501, 502, and 503. They remained corps-level assets and were deployed where needed. Battalion 501 took part in the Ardennes offensive, 502 was destroyed in the Battle for Berlin, and 503 was heavily engaged in East Prussia before its survivors surrendered. One reason the Waffen-SS was visually distinct was its use of camouflage. Troops wore patterned smocks and helmet covers, with reversible designs adapted to summer and winter conditions. Later in the war, they were issued full camouflage uniforms, including trousers and tunics. Armoured and artillery crews wore one-piece overalls in camouflage print. As German manpower declined, Himmler increasingly relied on ethnic Germans and foreign volunteers from occupied countries. While this expanded the number of divisions, it often came at the cost of training, cohesion, and discipline. The 16th SS Panzergrenadier Division Reichsführer SS, which included Austrian and Slovenian personnel, and the 28th SS Panzergrenadier Division Wallonien, composed primarily of Belgian volunteers, were both equipped with armoured fighting vehicles and served as part of the wider Waffen-SS structure. These units were part of the growing number of so-called foreign divisions raised during the war. Many of these formations were referred to as Freiwilligen divisions, meaning volunteer units. They included cavalry, mountain, grenadier, and panzergrenadier groups, drawn from a wide range of nationalities across occupied and allied European countries. Their overall military value varied significantly. While a few performed with discipline, many others were undertrained, poorly equipped, and considered unreliable in conventional operations. As a result, many of these divisions were assigned to security and anti-partisan duties in rear areas. These missions often escalated into violent reprisals and resulted in civilian casualties. There was considerable inconsistency in how these units were labelled. Some formations that were technically under SS control but did not meet the organization's strict racial criteria were designated with the suffix of the SS rather than the usual SS prefix. This naming convention served a political purpose to obscure the fact that these divisions did not fit the ideological profile originally intended for the Waffen-SS. The broader SS system contained many elements that operated outside the boundaries of conventional military conduct. While the worst crimes were committed by specialized units such as the Einsatzgruppen and personnel assigned to the concentration camp system, frontline combat divisions of the Waffen-SS were also involved in atrocities. Some participated in war crimes across multiple theatres of the war. One of the most serious incidents took place during the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, where large numbers of civilians were killed during brutal suppression operations. Despite these serious moral and legal issues, Waffen-SS armoured formations earned a military reputation for effectiveness in difficult battlefield conditions. Hitler increasingly relied on them to stabilize critical fronts or conduct counterattacks. In 1944 and early 1945, experienced SS divisions played key roles in halting Allied offensives at Arnhem, Wolumin, and in the Ardennes, where they helped delay or block major advances. During this period, the operational difference between the army and the Waffen-SS diminished, and they often fought side by side. As a fighting force, the Waffen-SS proved to be tactically competent and resilient, but its chief, Heinrich Himmler, lacked military expertise. Late in the war, he was appointed to lead Army Group Upper Rhine and later Army Group Vistula. These assignments were largely political and not based on military skill. Both commands were brief and marked by poor results. Himmler was sidelined from major operations such as the Ardennes campaign and was removed from command before he could direct Operation Solstice on the Eastern Front. By the final months of the war, the offensive capability of the Waffen-SS had largely been depleted. Supply shortages, heavy losses, and overall strategic collapse limited their ability to influence the outcome. However, morale within many of the units remained firm. Waffen-SS divisions continued to take part in Hitler's final efforts in Hungary and Belgium. As the front collapsed and the Red Army closed in on Berlin, the Waffen-SS remained among the last formations attempting organized resistance. In April 1945, as the capital was surrounded, Hitler expressed deep disappointment that the Waffen-SS had failed to defend Berlin. In his final days, he ordered the removal of SS insignia from uniforms, signaling a symbolic break from the organization he had once held in such high regard. The motto once embraced by the SS, "My honor is loyalty," had by then lost all meaning within a regime that was disintegrating from within. The 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler traced its origins to the early years of the Nazi Party. It grew from Hitler's original protection unit, following the disbandment of the SA's brief headquarters guard. In March 1933, Sepp Dietrich established the SS Guard Detachment Berlin with 120 men. Along with the dispositional troops of the SS, this would become one of the forerunners of the Waffen-SS. Initially stationed at the Alexander Barracks in Berlin, the unit was later relocated to Lichterfelde. By late 1933, the Berlin detachment was merged with a second unit formed in Jüterbog and redesignated as the Adolf Hitler Bodyguard Unit. In 1934, it became the official Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler and expanded to regimental strength. The unit participated in the annexation of Austria as part of the 16th Army Corps under General Heinz Guderian, and later took part in the occupation of Czechoslovakia. During the invasion of Poland, it served with Army Group South under Dietrich, and later deployed to France and the Low Countries. Although initially held in reserve, the division was committed against retreating British forces near Dunkirk and joined the final phase of the campaign as part of the 14th Army Corps. Its sister formation, Division Reich, originated in October 1939 from the Deutschland, Germania and Der Führer regiments. It was placed under the command of Paul Hauser. The division participated in the 1940 campaign in the west and was later stationed along the border with Vichy France before transferring to the Netherlands. In the Balkans, a detachment under Fritz Klingenberg famously secured the surrender of Belgrade without engaging in combat. Still under Hauser, the division later participated in the invasion of the Soviet Union. It remained on the Eastern Front until August 1941, before being withdrawn for refit. By winter, now under Wilhelm Bittrich, it was involved in the failed offensive against Moscow. Meanwhile, a third division was formed from personnel previously assigned to concentration camp duties. In October 1939, 3 regiments from the SS Guard units, totaling 6,500 men, were combined to form the Totenkopf division. Theodor Eicke, inspector of concentration camps and SS Guard formations, was appointed its commander. The troops were drawn from camps including Buchenwald, Dachau, Mauthausen, Sachsenhausen, and Frankenberg. Many of the officers came from the dispositional troops, while some additional elements had combat experience from the Polish campaign. Though initially equipped with Czech equipment, concerns about the unit's capability were soon put to rest. General Max Weichs, commander of the Second Army, inspected the division in April 1940 and found it to be a fully modernized motorized infantry unit. Totenkopf participated in the campaign in the West and was involved in the controversial La Paradis incident, where British prisoners of war were executed following their surrender. The officer in charge, Fritz Knöchlein, had served at Dachau and later went on to command a unit of volunteers in the Courland region. By mid-1941, Totenkopf and its related formations numbered about 40,000 men. However, many of its units were stationed in occupied territories such as France and Norway. When Operation Barbarossa began, Totenkopf deployed with nearly 19,000 men and took part in the siege of Leningrad alongside the 4th SS Police Division. It was later transferred to southern France for rest and was officially renamed the 3rd Panzergrenadier Division Totenkopf in late 1942. On 22nd October 1943, it became a panzer division under Max Simon and saw heavy combat at Kharkov, Belgorod and Kursk. In early 1943, Gottlob Berger proposed forming a new division made up of 17-year-old members of the Hitler Youth. Hitler approved the idea, and on the 10th of February, Berger was ordered to begin assembling the division. Although Berger initially nominated himself to lead it, the role went to Fritz Witt, a former Hitler Youth member and experienced commander from the 1st SS Panzer Division. Witt had previously served in Poland, France, Greece, and on the Eastern Front. On the 1st of May 1943, the first group of 8,000 volunteers began their training, although they received only 4 weeks of instruction instead of the planned 6. A second group followed in July. By September, the division's strength reached over 16,000 men, with training carried out at Beverloo in Belgium. Around the same time, the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen was formed under Wilhelm Bittrich. The division was mainly composed of conscripts from the Reich Labour Service. Bittrich, a veteran commander, had led the Deutschland Regiment and later briefly headed the 2nd SS Das Reich. The 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg, commanded by Michael Lippert, was also raised in February 1943. Like Hohenstaufen, it was filled with young recruits, many only 18 years old and drawn from the same labour programme. The unit was named after Georg von Frundsberg, a 16th century general who had served the Habsburg Empire. The Leibstandarte division was upgraded to brigade strength in August 1940 for the planned invasion of Britain. When that operation was cancelled, it was sent to Romania and participated in the Balkan campaign. The division moved through Yugoslavia and into Greece, where it played a key role in forcing the surrender of Greek forces. Kurt Meyer's reconnaissance battalion captured the Klisura Pass, taking over 11,000 prisoners, and the division received the surrender of multiple Greek army formations. In June 1941, the division expanded into a full motorized infantry formation and joined the invasion of the Soviet Union. It was involved in major battles at Kiev and Rostov before being sent to France for refit in 1942. It returned to the Eastern Front in 1943 as a Panzer Grenadier division under Theodor Wish and fought at Kharkov and Kursk. After Kursk, it briefly operated in Italy before returning again to the east as a panzer division. Following severe losses, the division was redeployed to France in April 1944. It established its headquarters at Turnhout in Belgium and was incorporated into the 1st SS Panzer Corps. Over 2,000 men from the 12th SS were transferred into its ranks, and new equipment was delivered. Despite this, by the time of the Normandy landings, the division was under strength. Many vehicles were missing or non-operational. Of the Panzer Grenadier units, none had functional armoured half-tracks, and over 1,000 technical personnel were still in Germany. Division Reich was also upgraded in 1942 to Panzer Grenadier status and was stationed in France before returning to the Eastern Front in early 1943. Under Georg Kepler, it participated in the battles of Kharkov and Kursk. In April 1944, a detachment of 2,500 men was transferred to the Bordeaux region under the command of Heinz Lammerding. He had experience in anti-partisan operations in the east and was formally given command of the 2nd SS Division in January 1944. Though his promotion raised questions, Lammerding maintained close ties with Himmler, which likely played a role in his appointment. The division absorbed 9,000 new recruits and received a shipment of tanks and assault guns in May. The 9th SS Panzer Division, still undergoing training, was assigned to Sepp Dietrich's 1st SS Panzer Corps alongside the 1st and 12th SS Divisions. In early 1944, it was moved to the 2nd SS Panzer Corps under Paul Hauser and took part in efforts to rescue German forces encircled in the Kamenets Podolsky pocket. It was then placed in reserve when the Allies landed in Normandy, but was soon transferred to the west. Under Bitterich's command, it arrived in France on the 12th of June. The 10th SS Panzer Division Frundsberg, commanded by Karl Fischer von Treuenfeld and later by Heinz Harmel, also saw its first combat in early 1944 at Tarnopol. Like the 9th SS, it was rushed to Normandy to help contain the Allied advance. As of 1 June 1944, the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Youth was, on paper, one of the most powerful armoured formations available to the German command. Its reported strength stood at approximately 20,500 men, though around 2,400 of these were stationed further north in Arnhem in the Netherlands. It is estimated that the division entered the Normandy campaign with roughly 17,000 troops. Its armoured component, Panzer Regiment 12, was led by Max Winscher and fielded a substantial force. The regiment had an authorised strength of 100, 1 Panzer IV tanks and 79 Panther tanks. An additional group of 13 Panthers was sent to the division the day after the Allied landings on the 6th of June. Positioned as a key part of the German response to the invasion, the 12th SS played a central role in the defence of Normandy. Its armoured and infantry elements helped delay the Allied advance for nearly 3 months in a series of intense and costly engagements. During this period, the division earned a battlefield reputation for its determined resistance and close quarters fighting under pressure. While the Waffen-SS would eventually include many foreign divisions, one of the more unusual early formations composed of German personnel came from the National Police. Around 15,000 uniformed policemen were used to form what became the 4th SS Division, known as the Police Division. At the time, Heinrich Himmler was unable to freely recruit from the German population due to objections from the regular army. However, as head of all German police forces, Himmler could draw from the Ordnungspolizei, the uniformed civil police, as well as from reservists in the General SS. Transforming domestic police officers into frontline combat troops was not without challenges. Many of the policemen were older men with no desire to serve away from their families, and their absence created gaps in civilian law enforcement. Some were already members of the SS, including figures like Heinz Jürgens and Hans Trauper, who attended officer training at the SS school in Bad Tölz before joining the Berlin police force. At the outbreak of war, both men joined the newly formed police division. The division was raised by Karl Pfeffer Wildenbruch in October 1939, and its troops initially wore a mix of SS and police uniforms. It remained under the administrative command of Kurt Daluege, the head of the Ordnungspolizei. Daluege had previously led the Berlin SS and was tasked with removing officers from the police who were not seen as fully committed to the National Socialist cause. This purge weakened the force, and in an effort to repair the damage, Daluege offered dismissed officers a path back if they completed political re-education. He also encouraged members of the General SS to join the police. During this early period, the term Armed SS was first formally introduced. An order issued on 7th November 1939 instructed all members of the General SS to apply as reserve officers for both the Waffen-SS and the police. Even so, the police division was not considered a full Waffen-SS formation. It lacked priority in equipment and received captured Czech weapons. However, Czechoslovakia had been a major arms producer, and the equipment was not inferior to what the German army used. The division was organized around two main infantry regiments, later restructured as grenadier regiments. It was not motorized, relying on horses for logistics and bicycles for troop mobility. It was given an artillery regiment equipped with German howitzers and some captured French pieces, all of which were horse-drawn. These limitations in firepower and mobility were common among infantry divisions at the time. Initially, the police division was not deployed to the front lines. Its early duties were limited to occupation roles in Poland. It briefly saw combat during the campaign in France in 1940, operating in the Argonne forest against retreating French forces. Separate police regiments, such as the 4th, were tasked with security duties in Paris, and on the 14th of June 1940, they participated in the German victory parade along Avenue Foch beneath the Arc de Triomphe. Between 1940 and 1942, around 30 police regiments were raised. Most were deployed to occupied areas, where they carried out security and anti-partisan operations. It was not until February 1943 that these units were officially renamed as SS Police Regiments to distinguish them from other German police and foreign auxiliaries. Outside Germany, ethnic German volunteers from Eastern Europe also filled the ranks of over 100 such regiments. The police division itself was transferred to East Prussia for additional training. In early 1941, it was placed under the control of the SS, and Arthur Milverstedt was given command. By the start of Operation Barbarossa on 22nd June 1941, the division had a strength of over 17,000 men. It fought with Army Group North during the advance into the Soviet Union and took part in the fighting around Luga, suffering around 2,000 casualties. These losses reflected either high commitment or weaknesses in leadership. The division's performance was considered adequate but not exceptional, though it compared favourably to the SS battle group in Finland, which later became the 6th SS Mountain Division. By August, the police division helped break Soviet resistance at Luga, but lost its commander Milverstedt in action. It then took defensive positions around Leningrad, where it remained through the winter of 1941. One of its regimental commanders, Alfred Wunenberg, received the Knight's Cross on 15 November for his leadership. In early 1942, Wunenberg assumed full command of the division. Under his leadership, the division fought along the Volkhov River. For its performance, he was later awarded the Oak Leaves. It was during this period that the division was formally absorbed into the Waffen-SS. Its personnel began wearing SS insignia and adopted standard uniforms. In the fighting against the Soviet Second Shock Army, Rudolf Panier, leading a battalion at Lubino, held a key defensive point and was awarded the Knight's Cross. He and fellow commander Bernhard Griese were later presented to Himmler in recognition of their actions. The division remained on the Leningrad front through another harsh winter. In February 1943, Soviet forces broke through near Lake Ladoga, and the division was forced to withdraw to new lines at Kolpino. After heavy losses, parts of the division were moved to Silesia for rest and reorganization. Friedrich Wilhelm Bock, commanding an artillery battalion, received the Knight's Cross during this phase. By May, a combat group from the division was assigned to security duties in Bohemia, Moravia, and Poland. Later that year, the division was upgraded to Panzergrenadier status with the addition of an assault gun battalion. Some elements were sent to southern Yugoslavia and northern Greece, where they were involved in anti-partisan operations. The unit developed a reputation for harsh conduct during these missions. In September 1943, the division moved to Belgrade for further training. At the end of the year, it redeployed to Salonika for continued anti-partisan actions. Meanwhile, some units remained on the Eastern Front. During the Soviet counter-offensive around Leningrad in January 1944, Hans Trauper led a battalion that held open an escape route for German forces. For his leadership, he received the Knight's Cross in October and was later transferred to command a regiment in the Frundsberg Division. Another officer, Rudolf Seitz, received the same award for his actions as a gun commander in the anti-tank battalion. On the 10th of June 1944, during operations in Greece, elements of the division led by Fritz Lautenbach carried out a reprisal at the town of Distomo. Around 200 civilians were killed following a partisan attack. Other actions were reported in the surrounding areas of Delphi, Ipati, and Spirkaida. Later that year, the division was redeployed to Romania. Although it failed in its efforts to rescue trapped units near Timișoara, it succeeded in stabilizing the front near Drobeta. At the end of October 1944, Johannes Scherg, commanding the division's reconnaissance company, received the Knight's Cross for maintaining a defensive position in the Banat region while under encirclement. He and his men eventually broke out. The division retreated with other German forces into Czechoslovakia and was later transferred to Army Group Vistula in Pomerania. During the defense of Danzig in early 1945, the division became fragmented. Heinz Jürgens, commanding the Armoured Reconnaissance Battalion, led 2,000 men in the defense of the Langenburg bridgehead for nearly a month. He was awarded the Knight's Cross on the 8th of May 1945, the day the war ended in Europe. Other elements fought around Hiller before being evacuated to Schwinnmünde. Some members escaped toward Berlin, though few reached their destination. Many surrendered to the Americans, while others were captured by the British or killed during the final Soviet advances. Johannes Scherg was among those captured at Lauenburg. The final commander of the division was Walter Haase, who had previously fought at Arnhem. A second police division was formed late in the war in February 1945. It was built from training staff at the police academy in Dresden and from officer cadets at the SS training school in Braunschweig. Although officially called the 35th SS Police Grenadier Division, it never reached full divisional strength and may have numbered no more than a single regiment. Its only combat-tested formation was the 14th Police Regiment, which had previously seen limited action in Russia and France. With little time for proper training, the division was rushed into battle along the Neisse front, suffered heavy casualties, and surrendered at Halbe in May 1945. One of the earliest and most unconventional SS divisions composed of German citizens was the 1st SS Mountain Unit. Of the 6 mountain divisions eventually created, only the 6th SS Mountain Division Nord was considered to have notable military quality. The others were formed from foreign volunteers or ethnic Germans and often lacked cohesion. To staff Nord, Himmler again drew from the Totenkopf units and reservists of the General SS. The formation began in Austria in late 1940 and early 1941. 3 regiments were brought together to create SS Battle Group North. Some foreign recruits also joined, including Hungarians, Romanians, and a few Norwegians who served in the ski battalion. Despite its designation, the unit was roughly the size of a brigade and was poorly prepared for combat. Artillery units had not completed live-fire training, and many infantrymen lacked proper instruction and equipment. Nevertheless, the division was sent to Finland to participate in the planned attack on the Soviet port of Murmansk. Its objective was to secure the Kola Peninsula in coordination with Finnish and German forces. When the offensive began, the men of Nord were confronted with dense forests, swampy terrain, and relentless mosquitoes. Navigation was difficult, and any stragglers risked immediate danger. In early July 1941, during the fighting around Sala, the inexperienced division suffered a major setback. 3 successive assaults were repelled, and when the Soviets counterattacked with armor, the SS troops broke and fled. Panic spread as the cry went up that Russian tanks were approaching. 5 battalions were thrown into disarray. Losses amounted to 86 killed, 232 wounded, and 147 missing. Throughout the Second World War, Nazi Germany struggled with severe manpower shortages, a factor that would ultimately prove fatal. Even by the final year of the war, Germany's arms industry was producing more equipment than its depleted armed forces could actually use. To offset the growing gaps, Adolf Hitler turned increasingly to foreign recruitment. More than 3 million non-Germans were drawn into military service, especially for operations on the Eastern Front. As early as 1940, shortly after securing much of Western Europe, Germany had already begun to organize police forces and volunteer units across occupied territories. These formations often wore the same uniforms as the German military, distinguished only by small national insignia patches on their sleeves. The level of collaboration in occupied Europe was far greater than many now realize. Hitler drew support from more than 15 European nations, with tens of thousands of men joining either the regular German army or the armed wing of the SS. Volunteers signed up for various reasons. Some saw a chance to fight for their national independence. Others were driven by anti-communist sentiment, and a few aligned ideologically with National Socialism, while some units were more reliable than others. Those viewed as politically loyal were absorbed into the Waffen-SS and formed into national divisions. Among the most dependable of these foreign volunteers were the Cossacks, who came to be known for their staunch loyalty. Many of the SS's foreign divisions were born out of local security formations created by Himmler's office. In particular, recruits from Northern and Western Europe, those from countries considered Germanic, were favoured. Volunteer units from the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark and Belgium formed the foundation of several specialised SS battalions. The 3rd SS Guard Battalion Northwest was composed of Dutch men. The 6th Battalion North was made up of Norwegians, and the Danish unit was known as the Guard Battalion Zealand. At the same time, the black uniformed political wing of the SS, known as the General SS, set up local branches in these occupied territories and recruited from among the most fervent supporters of German rule. These men often went on to serve in security or frontline SS formations. In Denmark, the government's foreign minister, Erik Scavenius, supported Germany's anti-Comintern pact and openly backed Danish recruitment for the Waffen-SS to help fight the Soviet Union. A paramilitary force known as the Schalburg Corps was established as a Danish offshoot of the Germanic SS. Though it never officially adopted the SS name, it served in an internal security role and later evolved into the SS Training Battalion Schalburg and then the Guard Battalion Zealand. Some of its members would go on to serve in the 11th SS Armoured Infantry Division Nordland, initially commanded by SS General Fritz von Scholz. In Norway, Hitler appointed Vidkun Quisling as the puppet leader in February 1942, although real power remained with the German administrator. Quisling's Justice and Police Minister, Jonas Lie, also headed the Norwegian branch of the Germanic SS, an SS-style organisation formed in the country, first known as the Norway SS, before being renamed Germanic SS Norway. Its membership peaked at around 1,300 men, most of whom eventually ended up in the Norwegian police or in Waffen-SS service. The Netherlands saw the formation of a fascist paramilitary group that evolved into the Dutch branch of the Germanic SS. Another force, the Landsturm Netherlands, became a militia of around 11,000 men operating under SS command. This unit fought against the Dutch resistance and later battled British forces near Arnhem. Eventually, these Dutch groups merged into the 34th SS Infantry Division, known as Landsturm Netherlands, led by SS Colonel Victor Knapp. Among all the foreign formations created by the SS, the 5th SS Panzer Division Viking stood out as the most capable and famous. SS recruitment chief Gottlob Berger convinced Himmler in October 1940 that a European SS was both necessary and useful, especially given Hitler's limitations on the recruitment of ethnic Germans. Thanks to Berger's efforts, by 1944 around 220,000 of the 910,000 total SS personnel were foreign volunteers. While viewed as traitors in their home countries, within Germany they were honoured as allies. Berger's foreign recruitment drive picked up momentum by late 1940. The Germania Regiment of the SS Combat Division was withdrawn from frontline duty to serve as the core of a new European division. Two other regiments had already been created, one made up of Scandinavian volunteers called Standarte Nordland, and another composed of Dutch and Flemish men called Standarte Westland. A Finnish battalion, known as Nordost, joined the effort in 1941, but was later disbanded for use as replacements. These became the core of what would be called the 9th and 10th SS Armoured Infantry Regiments, Germania and Westland. This new division was originally named Germania, but was later renamed Viking to reflect its Nordic character and to strengthen the identity of the volunteers. SS General Felix Steiner was placed in command. He faced immediate difficulties, including internal discrimination by German officers, which forced him to issue orders demanding humane treatment and equal respect for all troops under his command. Viking first saw action in the invasion of the Soviet Union as a motorized infantry division. In 1942, it was redeployed to the Caucasus and reorganized as an armored infantry division. In the spring of 1943, the division participated in counterattacks along the Don and Dnieper rivers. Around this time, the Nordland Regiment was removed from Wiking to form the backbone of the newly established 11th SS Armoured Infantry Division. An Estonian battalion replaced it within Wiking. The division then fought at the Battle of Kursk and, by the end of 1943, received its own tank battalion and was reclassified as a panzer division. In February 1944, Soviet forces launched a massive offensive in Ukraine. The Red Army's 1st and 2nd Ukrainian fronts linked up and surrounded 56,000 German troops near the towns of Cherkasy and Korsun. 6 divisions were trapped in what became known as the Korsun Pocket, including the Wiking Division and the Walloon Brigade, led by Belgian politician Léon de Grelle. At the time, the Walloons numbered just 2,000 men, having been recently transferred to SS control. Now led by SS General Herbert Otto Gille, Wiking had around 11,400 men, supported by fewer than 50 tanks and assault guns. The German High Command planned a 2-pronged rescue operation. One force would attack from the southwest, the other from the south. The Luftwaffe was tasked with supplying the encircled troops by air, much like the Demyansk airlift in 1942. However, poor weather, overstretched resources, and Soviet air superiority quickly made resupply impossible. The Southern Attack Force, reduced to just 61 tanks, made little progress. Hitler insisted the trapped units remain in position, promising relief was imminent. General Wilhelm Stemmermann, commanding inside the pocket, had no intention of surrendering and rejected Soviet calls to do so. Soviet commander Georgy Zhukov reported that the encircled German forces were suffering heavy losses and likely preparing for a desperate breakout toward Malaya Boyarka. Despite initial advances by the relief forces, they could not reach the pocket. The area under German control steadily shrank. Tanks from the 1st SS Panzer Regiment broke through 4 Soviet divisions, but by mid-February they had only 3 tanks and 4 assault guns left. Eventually, Hitler approved a breakout attempt. On 15th February, General Stemmermann was ordered to lead his remaining attack-capable troops out of the pocket and link up with German forces near Hill 239. The next day, Wiking launched the breakout through a snowstorm, pushing westward while the Walloon Brigade held the rear. Only 632 Walloons emerged without injury. Wiking reached the Gniloy Tikic River but found no bridges. Soldiers formed human chains to help their comrades cross the freezing water. The Germans reported 20,000 dead and 8,000 captured. Soviet figures were even higher, claiming 55,000 German casualties and 18,000 prisoners. Around 30,000 Germans escaped the pocket, largely thanks to Wiking and Wallonien. However, the division lost all its tanks and most of its heavy gear. The 11th and 42nd Army Corps were withdrawn from frontline duty, weakening Army Group South's ability to hold the line in Ukraine. By March 1944, a new crisis unfolded. Roughly 200,000 German troops were surrounded in the Kamenets-Podolsky pocket. Among them were remnants of the elite Waffen-SS divisions, including battle groups from Leibstandarte and Das Reich. The 1st SS had fewer than 1,250 men left, and the 2nd SS around 2,500. Most of Das Reich had already been redeployed to East Prussia to receive new tanks, including Panthers and Tigers. In early February, its units began arriving for training in Bordeaux. There was growing alarm among German commanders. A loss of this magnitude would rival the disaster at Stalingrad. As the Red Army launched a massive encirclement, the newly arrived 9th and 10th SS armoured divisions, Hohenstaufen and Frundsberg, were ordered to break through and assist the German 1st Armoured Army, which was struggling to retreat westward through dense fog and freezing conditions. Rearguard action was provided by a battle group under Heinz Lammerding, a senior SS officer from the 2nd SS Division, allowing the rest of the German forces to withdraw. While most of the soldiers were successfully evacuated, nearly all heavy equipment was abandoned, and only 45 armoured vehicles made it out. The remaining men of the elite bodyguard division managed to escape, but suffered significant casualties. The remnants were sent to Belgium to rest and rebuild under the 15th Army. Meanwhile, Lammerding's unit was relocated to Bordeaux, although a smaller force under Weidinger stayed behind to continue the fighting withdrawal through Proskurov and Tarnopol. The losses at Cherkasy marked the end of Germany's last real offensive strength in Ukraine, paving the way for the Soviet advances that followed in the summer and fall of 1944. One of the highest-ranking SS generals, Herbert Gille, reported directly to Hitler that the Wiking Division could no longer function as a combat force. The survivors were pulled back to the city of Breslau for reorganization, though a small battle group of around 4,000 men remained on the Eastern Front. The division would next be committed to battle in July 1944 to reinforce German defences along the Vistula River in Poland. Léon de Grelle, a Belgian political leader who had raised a volunteer formation of Walloon fighters, received one of Germany's highest awards for his leadership during the breakout. When the survivors returned to Brussels, they held a public celebration on the 1st of April 1944, with senior SS commander Sepp Dietrich in attendance. One of de Grelle's junior officers, Jacques Leroy, lost both his right eye and arm at Cherkasy, but refused to be discharged, a gesture that further convinced SS leaders of the commitment shown by some foreign units. As a result, de Grelle received approval to expand his brigade into a mechanized infantry division, although it never reached full strength. Elsewhere in Eastern Europe, Hungary had committed a large number of troops to the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Initially, this included a force known as the Carpathian Group, which was later expanded into 3 full army corps, totaling around 200,000 men. In addition, Hungary supplied manpower to 3 SS divisions: the 25th Division, named Hunyadi, the 31st Division, which also included Slovak volunteers, and the 33rd SS Cavalry Division. Neighbouring Romania provided even more troops to Germany's war effort. At the start of the war in 1941, Romania fielded its 3rd and 4th armies, totaling around 150,000 men. With reinforcements, this figure more than doubled. Romanian nationals also served in the 7th SS Mountain Division, named Prince Eugen, which consisted of volunteers from Romania, Yugoslavia, and other Balkan territories. Thousands of Russians and Ukrainians were recruited into German military forces, including the SS. These formations were often created in an improvised manner and lacked centralized organization. One example was the Russian National Liberation Army, formed in 1942, which included Ukrainian Cossacks. Better known as the Kaminsky Brigade, this unit was later reorganized into the 29th SS Infantry Division, totaling around 6,000 men. Kaminsky himself was executed by his superior officer for misconduct in Poland, and the remaining troops were absorbed into the 30th SS Infantry Division under the umbrella of the Russian Liberation Committee. A separate unit led by Oskar Dirlewanger was made up of former Soviet soldiers and became the basis of the 36th SS Infantry Division. Ukraine, hoping for independence through its alliance with Germany, saw as many as 180,000 of its citizens join the German army. In late 1942, around 70,000 Ukrainians joined German police forces, with roughly 35,000 assigned to 71 paramilitary battalions, some of which included Cossack units. In 1943, Germany allowed the creation of the 14th SS Division, formed from 30,000 Ukrainian recruits. German authorities were initially surprised when over 100,000 Ukrainian nationalists volunteered, but they later reduced the number to keep only those who met stricter military and ideological standards. In September 1944, over 1,200 Ukrainian soldiers from this division defected to the French resistance, bringing with them their full complement of weapons and equipment. These men were reorganized as the 1st Ukrainian Battalion and joined the French forces of the interior. On 3 October, they took part in an assault to secure Hill 736 near Belfort. Afterward, the French authorities made the unusual decision to fully absorb the battalion into the 13th Half Brigade of the French Foreign Legion. It was the only time in the Legion's history that an entire foreign military unit was incorporated in this way. Ironically, while the 30th SS Division was arriving in France, French volunteers fighting for Germany were still engaged in battle in the Carpathians. They had originally formed a small regiment under the SS in 1943, which was later expanded into a division known as Charlemagne. Sent to Pomerania in early 1945, the division was eventually scattered by the advancing Red Army. Remarkably, a battalion of these French fighters held out in the final defense of Berlin. A separate group attempting to return home was executed by Free French forces. At the start of 1945, 5 more SS divisions were formed from Latvians, Estonians, Ukrainians, and Russians. However, instead of fighting the Soviet army, the Cossacks were deployed to combat communist partisans in Yugoslavia. These 2 brigades later became the foundation for the 14th Cossack Corps. They participated in large anti-partisan operations such as Treibjagd and Kugelblitz, which involved heavy fighting across the Balkans. By late 1944, Himmler formally integrated the Cossack Corps into the SS system, redesignating it as the 15th SS Cossack Cavalry Corps. Despite the name, the the Corps remained largely autonomous and continued to report through army channels rather than SS leadership. As the war drew to a close, these Cossack units, like many of Germany's foreign formations, faced uncertain and often tragic fates. In early 1943, the armoured units of the Waffen-SS were brought together under the command of Paul Hauser, a seasoned general who had previously established this corps in France. On 12th January, the Soviet High Command launched a massive winter offensive aimed at retaking Kharkov, Ukraine's second largest city. This push involved multiple Soviet army groups converging from north to south, pressing against the overstretched German lines defended by the Second Army, 4th Panzer Army, and allied Hungarian, Italian, and Romanian forces. The newly formed SS Panzer Corps, reinforced by the 1st SS Division Leibstandarte, the 2nd SS Division Das Reich, and the 3rd SS Division Totenkopf, was sent to stem the tide. Despite early resistance, they were pushed out of Kharkov. General Hauser, seeing the danger of encirclement, reported the city as burning, unmanageable, and without reserves to secure it. Hitler nonetheless ordered it to be held. Reluctantly, Hauser committed Das Reich to defend the city, but kept his other two divisions back. At the same time, Field Marshal von Manstein believed that trying to defend Kharkov while also launching an offensive elsewhere would be impossible. He proposed temporarily abandoning the city, delivering a decisive strike to the south, and retaking Kharkov afterward. Fearing another Stalingrad, Hauser made the decision to withdraw from Kharkov to Krasnograd on 15th February, directly defying orders. By the time Hitler attempted to reverse this, the withdrawal was already underway. Around this moment of crisis, Hitler flew to Zaporozhye to meet with von Manstein. The Field Marshal could not even guarantee the safety of the visit. Local defences were minimal. Hitler dismissed concerns about the Soviet threat and rejected proposals to shorten the long front line. But worsening ground conditions helped the Germans. Totenkopf's tanks became stuck in the mud, preventing offensive movement, which delayed further Soviet gains. On the 19th of February, von Manstein launched his counterattack. Hauser's SS Panzer Corps pushed south from Krasnograd and linked up with the 4th Panzer Army. On 24th February, the Soviet 3rd Tank Army attacked, but the SS troops faked a retreat, drawing them into a trap. Das Reich and Totenkopf then struck hard, killing 9,000 Soviet soldiers and destroying over 60 tanks and hundreds of artillery pieces and vehicles. In the middle of these battles, Totenkopf's commander, Theodor Eicke, was killed when his plane was shot down during a frontline visit. Meanwhile, the 1st Panzer Army, supported by the 5th SS Division Wiking, smashed into Soviet positions further south, capturing large numbers of abandoned tanks that had simply run out of fuel. By late February, von Manstein's forces had advanced over 200 kilometers, threatening key Soviet supply lines. He had managed to split two major Soviet fronts and inflicted heavy losses, over 23,000 killed, 9,000 captured, and more than 600 tanks destroyed. With the initiative now in German hands, the goal became to destroy the remaining Soviet forces near Kharkov. Manstein made clear that victory did not depend on recapturing the city, but rather on crushing the Soviet formations, especially the 3rd Tank Army. By early March, Soviet troops had begun retreating, and the city was vulnerable once again. On the 6th of March, Hauser's corps began its renewed assault. Das Reich attacked from the west, Totenkopf from the north alongside the elite Großdeutschland division, and Leibstandarte from the south. Fierce street fighting followed. At Valki and around Kharkov's outskirts, battles erupted between German and Soviet armor. The SS units advanced slowly but steadily. On 14th March, after nearly a week of heavy combat, the city fell back into German hands. One battle group led by Kurt Meyer was pinned down in Kharkov cemetery, enduring repeated attacks until reinforcements broke through. Artillery, air support, and concentrated firepower eventually silenced the remaining Soviet resistance. After retaking the city, SS troops discovered desecrated graves of fallen comrades and executed harsh reprisals. Security units arrived shortly afterward, and in the days that followed, thousands of civilians were murdered in reprisal actions. Meanwhile, to the northeast, Totenkopf crossed the Donets River at Chuguyev, cutting off more Soviet troops. Alongside army units, the SS divisions closed the pocket. Though some Soviet units escaped, many were surrounded and destroyed. In total, the Germans claimed to have inflicted over 50,000 Soviet deaths, captured nearly 20,000 prisoners, and destroyed over 1,000 tanks and artillery pieces, but the cost was high. In just over 2 months, the SS Panzer Corps lost 11,500 men, with the 1st SS Division alone losing more than 4,000. The 5th SS Division also suffered heavy losses during battles with the 1st Panzer Army. Von Manstein viewed the operation as one of his most effective victories. Kharkov and Belgorod were back in German hands, and Soviet momentum was temporarily halted. However, the cost in lives and material, combined with the survival of key Soviet forces, meant that the win was only tactical. The broader strategic situation remained grim. Hitler, however, was euphoric, boasting that Hauser's corps was worth 20 Italian divisions. Establishing a private army outside the official armed forces required significant infrastructure. Above all, what the SS needed in its early years was a steady supply of trained officers. On the 1st of October 1934, Paul Lettow opened the first SS officer training school in Bad Tölz, Bavaria. This facility began with just 54 cadets. A second school was founded in the spring of 1935 in Braunschweig by Paul Hauser. These two institutions served not only the Waffen-SS, but the entire SS organization, with a combined staff of more than 750 personnel. Later, 3 more officer academies were opened at Klagenfurt, Posen-Treskau, and Prague. In parallel, 7 schools for non-commissioned officer training were established in places such as Arnheim, Braunsberg, Laibach, Lauenburg, Lublinitz, Posen-Treskau, and Radolfzell. Additional specialist training centers were created across Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and other occupied territories. After the war began, battle-hardened veterans were rotated back from the front lines to serve as instructors. Officers were required to commit to 25 years of service, non-commissioned officers 12, and enlisted men 4. Training was identical across all categories, with political indoctrination and physical conditioning being as important as military instruction. Cadets endured relentless parades, weapons handling, unarmed combat, assault courses, and strategic exercises conducted through tabletop war games. On the 1st of October 1936, Hauser was appointed head of the SS Special Troops Inspectorate, tasked with attracting new recruits. Over the next 4 years, this inspectorate also functioned as the de facto operational command of the SSVT until its reorganization into the Waffen-SS. One of Hauser's close aides at Bad Tölz was Hans van Salu, who later served on the Eastern Front with the Wiking Division and was accused of participating in a massacre of Jews at Zborov. Werner Ostendorf, another early instructor at Bad Tölz, went on to lead the Götz von Berlichingen Division in 1944. Among the other instructors was Richard Schulze, who later became Adolf Hitler's personal SS adjutant. The training program itself was shaped by Felix Steiner, a forward-thinking veteran of the First World War. Steiner advocated for the creation of flexible, mission-oriented battle groups. While commanding the SS Standarte Deutschland at Dachau, where his men shared guard duties with Totenkopf units, he stressed endurance and physical strength as essential to combat effectiveness. He wanted his troops to surpass not only army recruits, but also the elite Leibstandarte, who were widely viewed as rivals. Although many early SS recruits had limited formal education, they were held to a high standard of physical fitness. Heinrich Himmler proudly claimed in 1937 that only 15 out of every 100 applicants were accepted. While this exclusivity slowed the growth of the Waffen-SS, it produced men of a distinct physical and ideological mold. Training days began at 6 in the morning with physical drills. The cadets wore white vests with black shorts marked by the SS runes, and were fed only porridge and water for breakfast. Mornings included target practice and close combat training. 3 times a week, cadets attended ideological lectures on Nazi doctrine. Afternoons were spent on drill, kit cleaning and running circuits of the sports field. Roughly 85% of SS officers had seen service in the First World War, and around 1/4 had previously served in the post-war Reichswehr or Wehrmacht. Although existing army officers were not allowed to transfer directly into the Waffen-SS, those who held or had previously held a military rank were often commissioned into equivalent positions after completing SS training. Normally, an aspiring officer had to serve at least 1 year in the ranks before applying to the SS officer schools. Steiner promoted a more egalitarian culture among SS men. He encouraged officers and enlisted men to interact freely during off-duty hours, rejecting traditional army snobbery. Off the parade ground, they were to address one another simply as comrades. 1/3 of applicants failed their first attempt at passing out of training. Those who succeeded were permitted to take the SS oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler during a formal parade. They were then assigned to infantry or cavalry training schools for an additional 12 months. After this, they swore a separate oath in Munich to follow Himmler's strict marriage laws intended to preserve racial purity. These laws quickly proved impractical and were rarely enforced in the later years. Upon graduation from the SS officer school, each man was awarded a ceremonial dagger engraved with SS runes. Those who received battlefield promotions were only permitted to wear this dagger after successfully completing the officer's course. Men with SS membership numbers under 10,000 were also permitted to wear the SS signet ring. Eventually, any officer with 3 years of service became eligible for the ring. Graduates were sent on advanced combat courses to prepare them for the front. These included high-risk trials that tested bravery and nerve, such as crouching in a foxhole while a tank passed overhead, or standing motionless with a live grenade placed on their helmet. Some exercises involved live ammunition, and accidents were not uncommon. However, these extreme methods produced some of the Waffen-SS's most famous commanders, including Fritz Klingenberg, Otto Kumm, Kurt Meyer, and Fritz Witt. In 1938, after internal intrigue by Reinhard Heydrich, Hitler lost confidence in War Minister Werner von Blomberg. He dismissed the army leadership and merged his roles as Chancellor and War Minister, giving himself full control over the armed forces. To placate the regular army, Hitler ordered SS officers to serve temporary secondments of 6 to 12 months with army units. In the same year, Gottlob Berger took charge of SS recruitment and would later oversee the vast expansion of the Waffen-SS. By 1943, however, the training process became less rigorous due to mass expansion and the inclusion of more foreign volunteers. As a result, Germans from the Reich became a minority at the SS officer and NCO schools. Himmler relaxed his rules on racial purity and political instruction, and Fritz Klingenberg, now in charge at Bad Tölz, began presenting the Waffen-SS as a European force defending civilization from communism. By then, however, it was too late. Germany was losing the war, and Hitler had never been willing to grant real autonomy to foreign volunteers. As a result, local pro-German political parties struggled to gain support in their home countries. In most occupied regions, enthusiasm for the German war effort had faded due to repression and shortages. Nevertheless, in November 1943, 30 French officers arrived at Bad Tölz for training. Around 100 French NCOs also attended the SS Unterführerschulen to reach Waffen-SS standards. Many of these men later joined the French Charlemagne Division. Even neutral Sweden saw a small number of volunteers. Around 20 Swedish officers graduated from Bad Tölz. In Norway, Himmler hoped to raise an SS division of 60,000 men by the end of 1943. But a mass arrest of students in Oslo by the SS police chief deeply damaged recruitment efforts. In a last attempt to rally Norwegian support, an SS officer named Schulze convinced Hitler to send Vidkun Quisling a promise of independence and national recognition in the event of victory. According to Hauser, this news sparked a brief celebration among the instructors at Bad Tölz, though the situation at the front was already hopeless. Between 1939 and 1945, the SS officer schools produced at least 15,000 officers. As the war neared its end, remaining instructors and cadets were formed into emergency battle groups. Personnel from Braunschweig formed the core of the 35th SS Police Division. Bad Tölz sent men to the 38th SS Division Nibelungen, which was initially called Junkerschule in honor of its origins. Some instructors were even assigned to fictitious divisions on paper. As the Reich crumbled, others were thrown into last-ditch battles. Instructors from the Hitler Youth Cadet School in Hanover were sent to defend Ibbenbüren. The 20th SS Training Division fought British forces at Bremen. The 18th SS Training Battalion, composed of veteran officers and youth, also saw action in Bremen. Meanwhile, the 4th SS Field Training and Replacement Battalion ended the war fighting Soviet forces near Neustadt. The destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto remains one of the most horrific crimes of the Second World War, a ruthless campaign carried out by Heinrich Himmler's SS forces, including Waffen-SS training battalions. By 1943, Warsaw was under tight German occupation, effectively turned into a militarized police state, with more than 20 military and police stations dominating the city. Some 6,000 military police were stationed there. German was enforced as the official language. Street names were changed, media was tightly controlled, and public spaces were plastered with signs that declared, "For Germans only." Any form of resistance was met with execution by firing squad or public hanging. In the autumn of 1943, Governor-General Hans Frank gave the Gestapo permission to shoot anyone on mere suspicion. Initially, Jews were allowed to leave the ghetto during the day, provided they wore a yellow Star of David. But by October 1941, all gates were sealed and the ghetto became a virtual prison. In 1942, mass deportations began, with around 3,000 Jews per day being sent to the Treblinka extermination camp. At the Umschlagplatz railway siding in the northern part of the ghetto, thousands were held overnight before being loaded into cattle cars. By August 1942, 150,000 had already perished. Despite worsening conditions, most Jews remained compliant out of fear. By late 1942, fewer than 30,000 Jews remained in the ghetto, with tens of thousands more in hiding. Younger Jews began forming resistance groups such as the Jewish Combat Organization, who received limited support from the Polish Home Army. They began preparing for a final stand. Himmler visited Warsaw in January 1943 to assess the situation and ordered the total liquidation of the ghetto by mid-February. But due to troop shortages, especially after German losses at Stalingrad, the operation was delayed. In April 1943, SS officer Jürgen Stroop was given command of the assault, replacing von Sammern-Frankenegg. Stroop's task force included men from several Waffen-SS training units, Totenkopf, Florian Geyer, Leibstandarte, Das Reich, Viking, and various police battalions backed by Lithuanian militias and some Polish collaborators. The SS expected the action to last 3 days. It took nearly 4 weeks. Jewish resistance fighters, numbering about 600, initially held off the first wave of German troops with Molotov cocktails and small arms fire. Stroop's men responded with artillery, flamethrowers, and tanks. Block by block, they set the ghetto ablaze, believing fire would drive the Jews out of hiding. But many refused to surrender, choosing instead to burn or fight to the death. Women also took part in combat, often hurling grenades or firing pistols. Stroop expressed frustration over their refusal to give up, even as entire buildings were collapsing in flames. By late April, Himmler demanded results. Stroop resorted to flooding the sewers to flush out survivors, dropping smoke bombs into manholes and blocking escape routes. On the 16th of May, Stroop declared the operation complete. That evening, the SS demolished the Great Synagogue of Warsaw, symbolizing the annihilation of Jewish life in the city. He reported over 56,000 Jews captured or killed, around 7,000 had died in battle, 6,000 in the fires, and thousands more were deported to Treblinka. The rest were assumed to have been murdered later. Stroop's casualty figures, 16 SS dead and 90 wounded, are widely considered unreliable. His detailed 75-page report, complete with photographs, was bound in a leather album and presented to Himmler under the title the Warsaw Ghetto is no more. The elite SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte played a key role in preventing Italy from switching sides in 1943. After the Axis defeat in Tunisia, the fall of Mussolini became inevitable. The final push came with Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. It triggered a political crisis in Italy itself. Just 15 days after the Allies landed, Mussolini was arrested in Rome. A new government under General Badoglio took control and began secret negotiations with the Allies. Hitler, enraged and distrustful, saw betrayal coming. Despite General Jodl urging caution, Hitler chose swift action. His panzer forces would strike before Italy could unravel his southern flank. Just 2 days after Mussolini's arrest, Hitler held an emergency conference and laid out 4 military plans: a commando rescue of Mussolini, the capture of Rome to reinstate him, full occupation of Italy, and seizing or destroying the Italian fleet. The last two were combined under the codename Operation Axis. Hitler hoped these moves would pressure Italy into staying in the war. By late July, Hitler had drafted a directive outlining plans to occupy Italy and her overseas colonies. Though never officially issued, on 31st July, orders were quietly sent to German commanders in case Italy abandoned the Axis. While Hitler stopped short of marching tanks into Rome, he quickly moved to secure the Alpine passes between Italy, Germany, and France. 8 German divisions from France and southern Germany were assembled as Army Group B, with orders to stabilize the situation. Had the Italians acted fast, they could have sealed off those vital Alpine passes and isolated German forces already inside Italy. They even rigged the Brenner Pass for demolition, which could have cut the main rail link for 6 months. But Badoglio stalled. It took weeks to reach terms with the Allies. That delay gave Germany the time it needed to respond. German intelligence reported that Italian troops were low on ammunition. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, now responsible for securing Italy, wasn't surprised. He'd already seen the weakness of Italian logistics in North Africa. Instead of trying to hold all of Italy, the Germans planned to form a defensive line deep in the Apennine Mountains north of Rome. In August, the 1st SS and 25th Panzer Divisions, along with 5 infantry divisions, crossed into Italy. On the 1st of August, a standoff erupted at the Brenner Pass. Rommel noted in his diary that Italian General Gloria had ordered his troops to open fire on the 44th Infantry Division if it tried to pass, but the local Italians refused and backed off. Despite having 60,000 troops in the region, the Italians didn't stop the Leibstandarte's advance. The division rolled across the border, cautious of resistance, but the only losses were 2 Tiger tanks. One flipped on a concrete road and the other caught fire. The division was still rearming after its brutal time on the Eastern Front. After the hardship in Russia, recalled Werner Kindler, Italy was a pleasant change. Eventually, Italian divisions like Giulia and Trentina tried to move toward the Brenner. An SS patrol heading for the naval base at La Spezia was stopped near Aula. On the 9th of August, Rommel wrote to his wife, "The situation with these unreliable Italians is extremely unpleasant. They swear loyalty to our cause but seem to be stalling, maybe even negotiating." Tensions escalated as the Italians pulled occupation forces out of southern France and moved divisions northward. Rommel feared the Waffen-SS might soon take matters into their own hands. That same day, SS Corps Chief of Staff Ostendorf reported to Rommel, who reminded him that Hitler wanted cooperation, not open confrontation. Leibstandarte entered Bolzano, then Milan, where it received fresh vehicles and began disarming Italian troops. Field Marshal Kesselring, responsible for southern Italy and Sicily, later criticized Rommel for not dismantling the Italian army in the north earlier, which allowed many to flee and form partisan groups. On the 13th of August, Kindler's Armoured Personnel Carrier Battalion arrived in Trento and was ordered to move west of Verona. Their job was to support the 44th Infantry Division if needed. In central Italy, Kesselring's newly formed 10th Army now had 5 divisions near Rome, up from just 2. Still, tensions with the Italians simmered. General Westphal, Kesselring's Chief of Staff, spent much of his time managing their frustrations. On 15th August, Rommel met with Italian Army Chief General Roatta in Bologna. German intelligence feared Rommel might be poisoned or arrested, so he arrived with a Panzer Grenadier escort. Reuter claimed the troop movements were routine, just garrison rotations and counter-sabotage operations. He insisted Italy would defend its own soil against the Allies, but pushed for German air support and even suggested sending the Leibstandarte to Sardinia. The meeting ended without agreement. The very next day, Italian officials reached out to the British ambassador in Madrid to offer an unconditional surrender. By mid-August, with Sicily fully in Allied hands, the next phase began, landings at Reggio, Salerno and Taranto in early September. Kesselring's 10th Army had now grown to include 2 Panzer Corps and 1 anti-aircraft corps. The Italians had 21 divisions on the mainland, although many were poorly equipped, with a few more on Sardinia and overseas. To stop a full German takeover, they had 8 stronger divisions and a handful of reserves, but the Germans had 16 battle-hardened divisions. In the north, Rommel's Army Group B included 3 corps, with the Leibstandarte assigned to the 51st Mountain Corps. If the Allied fleet had landed near Rome on the 8th of September, the Italians might have fought the Germans with their remaining tanks, and Hitler would have had to abandon the region. But the landings came at Salerno, south of Naples. An airstrike on Kesselring's headquarters at Frascati that same day killed nearly 100 of his staff and severed communications. That evening, Werner Kindler recalled, news reached Leibstandarte that Italy had surrendered. The 2nd Panzer Corps was ordered to full alert. Hitler gave the signal. Operation Axis was active. As confirmation came through BBC broadcasts, German forces moved swiftly. In Verona, the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment disarmed Italian garrisons. In Cremona alone, they captured 650 officers and over 16,000 soldiers. Once weapons were collected, the Italians were told they could return to civilian life or join the German army as support troops. Martial law was declared across the region. For a brief moment, the fate of all German troops south of Rome hung in the balance. A standoff developed between 2 German divisions and 5 Italian divisions near the capital. When General Westphal tried to meet with Reuter, he was blocked by Italian soldiers. Sensing trouble, Westphal insisted. Reuter confirmed Italy had signed an armistice. Westphal acted quickly, perhaps too aggressively for Kesselring's taste. He summoned the Italian General Staff to a meeting, told them their options: surrender peacefully or face dive bombers. To back his threat, von Richthofen had 80 aircraft ready to strike. The next day, an Italian officer returned to sign the surrender. Leibstandarte moved into Turin and Milan. When news spread that southern Italian forces had joined the Allies, those still in the north were treated as enemy prisoners. By the 11th of September, Leibstandarte had captured over 106,000 Italian troops. Many others fled into the mountains southwest of Turin. Kindler noted with satisfaction that the division greatly benefited from Italian stockpiles of vehicles and gear. Hitler's final move was to rescue Mussolini. For that, he turned to Otto Skorzeny. On 12th September, SS commandos landed a glider at the hotel where Mussolini was being held. Joined by an Italian general, they stormed the building. The guards didn't resist. Confused, unsure whether to fire on their former leader or their own general, they simply surrendered. Mussolini was back in German hands. The mission was over, but Italy was now firmly split between resistance and occupation, loyalty and betrayal. In the summer of 1943, Adolf Hitler placed his hopes on the armoured divisions of the Waffen-SS to deliver a decisive blow on the Eastern Front at a place called Kursk. The formation under General Paul Hauser had now been renamed the 2nd SS Panzer Corps and included 3 key divisions: the Leibstandarte, Das Reich and Totenkopf. Meanwhile, a new 1st SS Panzer Corps was being assembled in Belgium under Sepp Dietrich. Hauser's force remained part of General Hoth's 4th Panzer Army under Field Marshal von Manstein's Army Group South. Nearby in reserve was the Wiking Division. The Red Army now held a deep bulge around the city of Kursk, anchored by German forces to the south near Kharkov and to the north around Orel. Hitler's plan, though delayed, was to pinch off this massive salient by attacking from both flanks. Manstein's forces would strike north from Belgorod and Kharkov, while General Model's 9th Army would push south from Orel. If successful, this pincer movement would trap huge Soviet forces. But what Hitler underestimated was the sheer scale of Soviet reserves waiting just beyond the battlefield. For this operation, codenamed Citadel, Hitler assembled the largest concentration of tanks ever deployed on such a narrow front. During the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, 3,300 tanks were used across a front over 1,500 kilometers wide. Now, in 1943, he planned to push 2,700 tanks into a corridor barely 95 kilometers wide. Roughly two-thirds of all German tanks on the Eastern Front were assigned to this battle. While the numbers sounded impressive, 1,850 frontline tanks, 200 older models, and over 500 assault guns spread across 16 armoured divisions and the 3 assault gun brigades. The truth was that most of these units were under strength. A panzer division was supposed to have around 200 tanks and 15,000 men, but the average strength had fallen to just 73 tanks. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps, however, remained one of the most formidable, with over 160 tanks and assault guns in each division. The Germans placed great faith in their new generation of armoured vehicles. For the first time since the early days of the war, they had tanks capable of destroying Soviet armour from a distance. Among these were the Tiger and Panther, the Ferdinand tank destroyer, and the newer Hummel, Nashorn, and Wespe artillery vehicles. But most of these were available only in small numbers. Just 90 Ferdinands, around 200 Panthers, and a little over 100 Tigers. The bulk of the Panzer Force still relied on older Panzer III and IV models. Germany's industrial push had simply come too late to field these weapons in decisive strength. Meanwhile, the Red Army had not only prepared for a German assault, but also positioned itself to launch its own counter-offensive once the German advance was stopped. By June, Soviet workers and civilians had constructed a complex network of 8 defensive belts stretching 175 kilometers deep. Over 40,000 mines had been laid across the battlefield. In some areas, up to 5,000 anti-tank and anti-personnel mines were packed into just 1.5 kilometers of front. These minefields were covered by artillery, mortars, and anti-aircraft guns repurposed for ground fire. Beyond that, tanks would face dense anti-tank gun clusters, machine guns, and infantry fire designed to steer them straight into more traps. In total, the Soviets had over 6,000 anti-tank guns, 20,000 artillery pieces and mortars, and nearly 1,000 rocket batteries ready for action. The German attack began on the 5th of July, 1943. Hausser's 2nd SS Panzer Corps launched its assault toward the village of Bykovka with over 360 tanks and nearly 200 assault guns. They captured the town and cut a vital road linking Oboyan and Belgorod, but were soon met by fierce resistance from Soviet armour. On the following day, the Leibstandarte and Das Reich divisions advanced north along the road to Oboyan. Near the village of Yakovlevo, they encountered a Soviet tank brigade. At 1,000 meters, a firefight erupted. After an hour, 12 Soviet tanks had been knocked out. For some crews, it was their first taste of battle, and it came with chaos. One panzer driver remembered his first days as little more than a loud explosion after hitting a mine. By the afternoon of 6th July, Das Reich had captured the village of Luchki. This opened a hole in the Soviet lines, and the SS pushed into the 2nd defensive belt. However, slow progress by other German units exposed their flanks to Soviet counterattacks. Manstein's plan was now off balance, with a third of his armour forced to defend rather than break through. In response, the Soviets rushed reinforcements to the area. Lieutenant General Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army, with over 600 tanks and assault guns, was sent toward the small town of Prokhorovka. The Battle of Kursk had become a grinding test of endurance. Even with elite units and advanced equipment, the Germans had failed to break through, and for the Red Army, the real offensive was only just beginning. The Waffen-SS would be pushed to their very limits. The battle was a success and a failure, with horrific losses on the Soviets, but the Germans had to pull back, and from this moment, the war was a grinding defense. After the failure of Hitler's final gamble in the West, the Ardennes offensive, many in the German High Command assumed that what was left of Sepp Dietrich's 6th Panzer Army would be urgently withdrawn eastward to shore up the crumbling lines facing the Red Army. Soviet forces had already reached the Oder River, threatening Berlin itself, but instead of repositioning his elite armoured units to defend the heart of the Reich, Hitler made a baffling and costly decision. To the dismay of his generals, he ordered the 6th Panzer Army to Hungary to launch yet another offensive. Berlin's defence would not fall to hardened veterans, but to a hastily cobbled-together force now named Army Group Vistula, under the command of Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler. Desperate to reclaim some measure of control, Himmler proposed a counterstroke along the Oder. The Red Army had thrust a dangerous salient west of the river, and the plan was to pinch it off with a simultaneous strike, one from Pomerania under Himmler's direction, and another from Silesia under General Ferdinand Schörner. The operation was named Sonnenwende, or Solstice, and envisioned with grand ambition. Over 1,200 tanks were earmarked for the assault, but these numbers existed only on paper. The German rail network was overloaded, fuel was nearly gone, and ammunition stocks were pitifully low. Worse, many of the panzer formations intended for the assault were already locked in holding positions on the northern Oder, guarding the critical heights near Seelow, the gateway to Berlin. The attack would fall to SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner and his newly formed 11th SS Panzer Army. It sounded impressive, but like much in the dying Reich, it was a facade. The formation existed mostly on paper, its so-called corps made up of shattered remnants and understrength divisions. Among them were the foreign volunteer units of the Waffen-SS, Nordland, Netherland and Wallonian, composed of Scandinavian, Dutch and Belgian recruits. These were to be the spearhead of what was quietly understood to be one of Germany's final offensives on the Eastern Front. The Nordland Division, raised in 1943, had once held ambitions of becoming a multinational Nordic force under German command, but manpower never matched ideology. Dutch leader Anton Mussert demanded his countrymen be separated into their own unit, which resulted in a chronic shortage of recruits. Germans and Hungarians were brought in to fill the gaps. After limited anti-partisan operations in the Balkans, the division, under SS Brigadeführer Joachim Ziegler, was shipped to the Eastern Front to face the Red Army head-on. The Dutch-Netherland formation, originally a brigade, had fought hard near Leningrad and was now officially designated a division, though in reality it remained closer to regimental strength. Commanded by SS Brigadeführer Jürgen Wagner, it lacked the numbers and equipment of a full fighting force. Likewise, Leon de Grel's Walloon Volunteers, now wearing the title of 28th SS Division Wallonian, never approached true divisional size. While Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army was preparing for Hungary, other veteran units were scattered and realigning. Hohenstaufen had withdrawn through Germany after fierce fighting and was sent to the Mayen area to rearm. Frundsberg, its sister division, was reassigned to the Vistula sector with what was left of its armour, 38 Panzer IVs and 53 Panthers. These would not accompany the Hungarian push, but instead take part in Himmler's Solstice offensive. Supporting them were the heavy Tiger battalions. The 502nd had been pulled back to refit, while the 503rd was split and repositioned. One portion moved to the area around Arnswald, another to Landsberg and Kustrin. In early February, the Germans found themselves in a crisis. A battalion under SS Obersturmbannführer Fritz Herzig, accompanied by a few panzers and thousands of soldiers and civilians, became encircled in the town of Arnswald. Rather than abandon them, SS Untersturmführer Fritz Kauerauf led a small group of Tiger IIs from Stargard to break through the Soviet encirclement and relieve the pocket. He soon became embroiled in the opening phase of Operation Solstice. On February 13, 1945, a critical war council was held. General Heinz Guderian, along with Sepp Dietrich, argued directly with Hitler, urging a pincer movement to reopen the corridor between East Prussia and Pomerania. Himmler, also present, was visibly uncomfortable. He objected to the plan, perhaps sensing he was about to be bypassed. Guderian didn't trust Himmler's staff. In particular, he dismissed SS Gruppenführer Lammerding, formerly of Das Reich, as unqualified, a police officer playing general. Guderian wanted command handed to a professional, and after 2 hours of tense argument, Hitler conceded. He turned to Himmler and said flatly, "Wenck will come to you this evening. and take command. The attack begins on the 15th. Though framed as a transfer of authority, it was a clear humiliation. Himmler was being replaced in all but name. He quietly withdrew to a hospital and left the operation in others' hands. Before disappearing from command, he issued one last order of the day: forward through the mud, forward through the snow, a theatrical attempt to inspire troops he would not lead. On February 15th, the offensive was launched. Steiner's 11th SS Panzer Army, now joined by elements of Frundsberg, Nordland, Nederland, Wallonian, and a few other scattered divisions, moved against the Soviet lines near Stargard and Arnswald. Initially, the Germans made gains. Nordland spearheaded the push, breaking into the Soviet ring around Arnswald and freeing the trapped defenders. The corridor was widened the next day as the Germanic SS Corps joined the attack. But the offensive lacked the means to go further. There was almost no Luftwaffe presence and artillery support was minimal. Red Army reserves soon responded with crushing force. The Tiger IIs of the 503rd held the corridor open long enough for civilians and wounded to be evacuated. In one brief stretch of fighting near Danzig and Gottenhafen, they destroyed over 60 Soviet tanks. But such moments were fleeting. The IS-2 Stalin tanks arrived in force on February 17th, heavily armoured, wide-tracked, and equipped with powerful 122mm guns. Even the vaunted Tiger II now struggled to survive. The ground softened under the thawing winter. Soviet tanks, built to move in deep mud, advanced where German vehicles bogged down. On the same day, General Wenck, now leading the operation, was seriously injured in a car crash while returning from a meeting with Hitler. With him out of action, the attack quickly unravelled. Steiner ordered a withdrawal, pulling his battered formations back towards Stargard and Stettin. The surviving panzers were relocated to the Oder front. The Polizei division, least damaged, was shipped north to Danzig to help with its doomed defence. By February 19th, the Soviets had recaptured Arnswald, destroyed the base at Stargard, and surrounded Graudenz. Operation Solstice had collapsed. Himmler's army group Vistula had taken devastating losses. Nordland fell back toward Berlin. Netherlands survivors reached Fürstenwalde and surrendered to the Americans weeks later. Leon de Grelle escaped to Denmark, then Norway, and finally fled into exile in Franco's Spain. The rest of his Walloon volunteers were captured by Soviet troops at Schwerin. In truth, the operation had been little more than a nuisance to the Red Army, an irritation, not a threat. Hitler and Himmler had gambled with some of the last intact SS formations and lost. The men who had once shocked Europe with their speed and firepower were now exhausted, scattered, and bleeding into the snow-covered soil of Pomerania. The Waffen-SS, born in fire and forged in ambition, had reached the edge of annihilation, and for the final battle, the defense of Berlin, Himmler would no longer be present. The Reichsführer had been pushed aside. His legacy and the SS he had so carefully cultivated would meet their end, not in glory, but in ruins. By late January 1945, the Eastern Front had reached a critical moment. The Red Army was across the Oder, breathing down Berlin's neck. At Riesen, near Kustrin, Soviet tanks had already pushed across the river and begun to establish a bridgehead just 72 kilometers from the German capital. Army Chief of Staff Heinz Guderian recognized the danger immediately. He called for every available formation, divisions from Norway, Yugoslavia, Denmark, Italy, and even those trapped in the Kurland pocket, to be redeployed to the Oder. If Berlin was to be saved, it had to be now. Guderian also demanded that Sepp Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army, Hitler's most powerful armoured formation, be recalled from the west and placed on the defensive east of the capital. But Hitler had other plans. Rather than prepare for the defence of Berlin, he envisioned a final counterstroke in Hungary, an operation to reclaim the oil fields and deal a surprise blow to the Soviets. The offensive would strike between Lake Balaton and Lake Velence, aiming to shatter Marshal Tolbukhin's Third Ukrainian Front. The assault was codenamed Frühlingserwachen, Spring Awakening. Dietrich's elite 6th SS Panzer Army, along with the 6th Army and the Hungarian 3rd Army, would be the hammer. To their south, the 2nd Panzer Army, thinly equipped and short on tanks, would attack eastward, while Army Group E in Yugoslavia would launch a coordinated blow from the Drava River region. On paper, the German order of battle looked impressive. The 6th SS Panzer Army deployed 4 elite SS Panzer divisions, Leibstandarte and Hitlerjugend under the 1st SS Panzer Corps, and Das Reich and Hohenstaufen under the 2nd. They were joined by 2 infantry and 2 cavalry divisions, plus 2 heavy tank battalions, boasting around 60 Tiger IIs. In total, Germany committed over 900 tanks and assault guns to the battle. The 6th Army fielded 5 panzer divisions and 3 infantry divisions, while the Hungarians added several more. But reality was far bleaker. These units were exhausted, having bled themselves dry in the Ardennes just weeks earlier. Fuel was scarce, morale was cracking, and reinforcements were thin. The panzer crews were veterans, but they were being asked to perform a miracle. Opposing them, Marshal Tolbukin's Soviet front had only 400 tanks, but possessed 407,000 men, nearly 1,000 aircraft, and a staggering 7,000 guns and mortars. When Hungarian deserters revealed the German plans in early March, Tolbukin knew exactly where the blow would fall. He ordered 3 deep defensive belts constructed in the flatlands between the lakes and prepared his men to absorb the strike. On March 6th, after a short artillery barrage, the Germans attacked. The 6th SS Panzer and 6th Armies launched a 3-pronged offensive. At first, progress was made. The 1st SS Panzer Corps advanced with speed, capturing ground near the Danube, but already disaster was brewing. The terrain was flooded and soft, broken by canals and swamps. Hundreds of tanks became stuck in the mire, including 15 Tiger IIs that sank up to their turrets in the mud. Das Reich and Hohenstaufen joined the battle on March 8th and 9th, bringing the panzer count to 600. Still, the gains were marginal and time was slipping away. Dietrich, furious and exhausted, appealed to Hitler to halt the offensive. He did so on March 11th and again on the 14th, pleading to save what was left of his command, but his requests were ignored. On March 14th, the last German reserve, the 6th Panzer Division, with 200 armoured vehicles, was thrown in for a final push. They advanced for 2 days and nearly broke through to the Soviet rear lines, but it was too little, too late. By March 15th, over 500 panzers had been lost, along with 300 artillery pieces and 40,000 men. Spring awakening was over. Dietrich tried to justify the retreat as a maneuver to protect Vienna. It was partially true. The Red Army had been slowed, and the Soviets were now shifting their axis of attack south of the Danube. But the damage was done. The Soviets reinforced their position with the 6th Guards Tank Army, raising their armoured strength to 600 vehicles. Their goal was now clear: destroy the 6th SS Panzer Army. On March 16th, the Soviet counter-offensive began. It struck across the entire front west of Budapest. The German lines broke almost immediately. In the north, Hungarian units collapsed or defected, exposing the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to encirclement. Soviet forces tore a path through General Balk's 6th Army. The Hitlerjugend division was rushed in to plug the breach but was quickly overwhelmed. A massive battle flared around Lake Balaton. The Germans found themselves encircled once more. Guderian, watching from headquarters, was stunned. Up to now, he wrote, the morale of the SS divisions had been high, but now it cracked. Entire formations began to fall back, disobeying orders. Even the Leibstandarte was retreating, exposing Balk's flank. 6 days into the Soviet counterattack, 4 panzer divisions and 1 infantry division were encircled near Székesfehérvár. Only a narrow corridor, just 1.5 kilometers wide, remained open. Under constant shell fire, the 6th SS Panzer Army fought desperately to escape. Dietrich ordered a full retreat against Hitler's direct commands. Hitler's response was apoplectic. When informed of the withdrawal, he erupted. Guderian recalled, he flew into a towering rage. He couldn't believe that Himmler's elite Waffen-SS had failed him. Hitler blamed Dietrich personally and accused the Waffen-SS of betrayal. In a fit of rage and humiliation, he ordered that the SS armbands be stripped from all members of the 6th SS Panzer Army. It was a symbolic act meant to disgrace them. Guderian was ordered to carry out the insult. He refused. Himmler, too cowardly to protest, simply relayed the message without defending his men. When Sepp Dietrich received the teletype, he read it in silence. Then, filled with quiet rage, he threw it on the table before his divisional commanders and said, "There's your reward for 5 years of loyalty." He refused to pass the order on. The men heard of it anyway. Some, legend claims, sent back their iron crosses, others something worse. By March 25th, the Soviet offensive had shattered what remained of the German position in Hungary, a 25 kilometers Zakadek, a front batört. Vienna was now exposed. Dietrich attempted to regroup along the Rab River, but the Red Army swept across it on March 28th. Austrian towns like Győr and Papa fell one after the other. By April 2nd, Soviet spearheads had reached Lake Neusiedler on the doorstep of Vienna itself. 11 days later, the capital of Hitler's homeland fell. 125,000 German troops were taken prisoner. The 6th SS Panzer Army's final transmission to Berlin read, "The garrison of Vienna has ceased to exist." Despite their exhaustion, the troops are fighting with exemplary courage. It was over. The once proud 6th SS Panzer Army, spearhead of so many campaigns, was finished. The great offensive at Lake Balaton, dreamed up in Hitler's bunker, had become a graveyard. "It's well named," Dietrich later said bitterly. "The 6th SS Panzer Army. It's only got 6 tanks left." By April's end, Vienna was gone, Hungary was lost, and within weeks, so too was Hitler. Were the Waffen-SS heroic patriots or ideological zealots complicit in atrocity? The answer is not easily found in black and white. Some commanders viewed them as brave, disciplined fighters. Field Marshal von Manstein once remarked, perhaps too generously, that many within their ranks were merely misled by ideology and would have preferred to serve under the regular army structure rather than under Himmler's control. He praised their courage and reliability, though it was clear his admiration was directed at the ethnically German SS divisions, not the more chaotic foreign formations later absorbed into their ranks. General Heinz Guderian echoed this view, recalling that in his direct experience with units such as the Leibstandarte and Das Reich, the SS divisions demonstrated exceptional morale, discipline, and combat effectiveness. Much of their reputation was built in the brutal campaigns of the Eastern Front. In 1943, they played a decisive role at Kharkov after the collapse at Stalingrad. Although they failed to break Soviet lines at Kursk, they were instrumental in saving trapped Wehrmacht formations and blunting major Soviet offensives in 1944. On the Western Front, they held back the Allies in Normandy for months. Guderian credited General Paul Hauser with much of their organizational success and leadership, contrasting his admiration for Hauser with disdain for Himmler, whom he considered delusional and disconnected from military reality. Even Field Marshal Kesselring described Hauser as the most competent and popular SS general. But this battlefield reputation was not enough to shield them from growing distrust. After the failed July 1944 assassination attempt on Hitler, the Waffen-SS became the Führer's preferred tool as confidence in the regular military faltered. Yet this favoritism eroded by early 1945, when their defeats in the Ardennes, Alsace and Hungary marked a turning point. By March, Hitler ordered Waffen-SS troops to surrender their distinctive armbands, a symbolic gesture of estrangement noted by Guderian. Many high-ranking commanders believed the Waffen-SS, despite their bravery, were ultimately a strategic mistake. Manstein argued that forming them into a separate force drained critical manpower from the army. He lamented that many potential non-commissioned officers were wasted in what he described as excessive bloodletting with little to show for it. General von Mellenthin agreed, criticizing the decision to prioritize the creation of new Waffen-SS divisions over maintaining experienced panzer units. He recounted his unit being assigned a Russian-manned SS formation, the 30th SS Grenadier Division, which he deemed mutinous and advised disbanding, advice that was ignored, leading to mass desertions. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, also tried to highlight the logistical inefficiency caused by separate SS formations. Each had its own redundant bureaucracy for food, transport, communications, and even medical services, which drained resources from the Wehrmacht. Hitler, however, saw these parallel systems as a way to divide power and prevent any single military branch from threatening his control. After the failed bomb plot of 20 July, Hitler's paranoia only intensified. He admitted that forming so many Waffen-SS units was a calculated effort to divide and weaken the regular army. This divide-and-rule approach bred deep resentment. Major Bernd Freytag von Loringhoven, a member of Hitler's staff, noted how the Waffen-SS often sought to bypass army authority and made damaging accusations against army commanders, which soured inter-service relations. Yet, Guderian maintained that, despite institutional rivalries, there was genuine battlefield camaraderie between SS and army troops. While the Waffen-SS fielded elite formations that fought with distinction, this cannot erase their direct involvement in war crimes and mass executions. From the war's beginning, such atrocities were present. In September 1939, SS troops executed 50 Jews inside a synagogue in Poland. Though one soldier was court-martialed, his death sentence was overturned by a judge citing racial provocation and youthful enthusiasm, a shocking glimpse into the distorted legal and moral standards of the time. In France, the Totenkopf division murdered surrendered British soldiers at Le Paradis in 1940. On the Eastern Front, Totenkopf routinely executed partisans and civilians. Its reputation for brutality was well known, though von Manstein still considered it an effective combat unit, if hampered by poor training and reckless losses. The Leibstandarte division, meanwhile, was responsible for the massacre of British POWs at Wormhout in 1940, and again implicated at Malmedy in 1944. In Russia, they displayed even fewer restraints. But there is no denying that every side committed mass crimes, shootings and killing of POWs, especially among American forces in Italy and Normandy. Other units left similarly grim legacies. The Florian Geyer division murdered thousands of civilians in the Pripet marshes. Das Reich aided in mass executions near Minsk and carried out the infamous slaughter of civilians at Oradour-sur-Glane. Yet some divisions, like Frundsberg and Hohenstaufen, reportedly treated captured Allied troops at Arnhem with decency, offering a stark contrast within the same military branch. Responsibility for these crimes lay ultimately with Hitler, who demanded retaliatory bloodbaths for captured or killed German soldiers. Albert Speer later recalled how Hitler insisted on revenge when hearing Soviet forces had executed prisoners, believing that blood must be repaid with blood. SS units across Europe, whether in Russia, Greece or Italy, took this to heart. The 4th SS Polizei Division committed atrocities in Distomo, Greece. In Italy, the 16th SS Panzergrenadier Division Reichsführer SS slaughtered villagers at Sant'Anna di Stazzema and Marzabotto. Guderian believed the militarization of the Allgemeine SS and their use as police had dragged the combat branches into disrepute. He especially criticized the influx of unreliable foreign volunteers into the Waffen-SS in the war's final years. As Germany collapsed, these units turned on their own people. SS and SD units conducted kangaroo trials, executing alleged deserters and civilians without papers. Over 14,000 Germans were killed this way, ironically a Waffen-SS division's worth of their own. Trying to separate the crimes of the Waffen-SS from those of the broader SS structure is ultimately futile. Whether labelled as police, Totenkopf, or Waffen-SS, they all served the same master and pursued the same policies. Even splitting them by nationality, German, ethnic German, or foreign volunteer, makes little difference. Their crimes were systematic. At Nuremberg and later at the Dachau trials, many Waffen-SS members were held to account. The argument that they were just another fighting force was firmly rejected. The tribunal concluded that the Waffen-SS had not only participated in battlefield crimes, but had also provided men for the Einsatzgruppen and had overseen concentration camp guards. These were not just elite soldiers, they were enforcers of the Nazi regime. Senior leaders met varied ends. Himmler took poison in British custody in May 1945. Theodor Eicke died in combat in 1943. Sepp Dietrich and Jochen Peiper were both convicted for their roles in the Malmedy massacre. Dietrich served 10 years, Peiper 12. Peiper later moved to France, where he was murdered in 1976. His killer was never found. Hermann Priess also faced trial for Malmedy and was released in 1956. Not only commanders were tried, SS Oberscharführer Werner Kindler remembered how several enlisted men from Leibstandarte were sentenced to death by American tribunals. He later claimed that the trials were unfair and that confessions were forced through intimidation and mock executions, a charge the Allies denied. Others fared differently. Charges against Felix Steiner were dropped and he was released in 1948. Wilhelm Bittrich was twice acquitted by French courts. Otto Weidinger was cleared of involvement in the Oradour and Tula massacres. Kurt Meyer, convicted in Canada for killing prisoners, had his death sentence reduced and served several years in prison. Some, like Fritz Knöchlein, paid with their lives. He was hanged in 1948 after a British court found him guilty for the Le Paradis massacre. Jürgen Stroop was executed in Warsaw for destroying the Jewish ghetto. Wilhelm Mohnke, long suspected of war crimes, was investigated but never charged. Leon de Grelle, living openly in Spain, once appeared at his daughter's wedding wearing his SS uniform. Mohnke admitted that, while many Waffen-SS men fought bravely and were respected by the Soviets for their courage, undeniable crimes had been committed. Paul Hauser, until his death in 1972, remained one of the staunchest defenders of the Waffen-SS, writing the book Soldiers Like Any Other in their defense. Guderian supported his effort, insisting that lies and half-truths had tainted the memory of these men. Others, like Kurt Meyer, claimed they were simply soldiers doing their duty. Members of the SS fought to the bitter end in Berlin as the Red Army closed in. SS Brigade Führer Wilhelm Mohnke commanded a makeshift force of roughly 2,000 men defending the heart of the government district, including the old Reichstag and the Reich Chancellery, behind which lay Hitler's bunker. Hitler's personal bodyguard, a small detachment of 30 men, was led by SS Sturmbahnführer Franz Schädler. Nearby, the Hermann von Salza SS battalion, equipped with a few remaining Tiger tanks, dug into the Tiergarten in a last-ditch effort to halt advancing Soviet armour. This central zone, named the Citadel, was defended under the codename Operation Clausewitz. As the Soviets broke through Berlin's outer lines, about 10,000 troops from scattered army and SS formations were pushed back into the city centre, only to be encircled and crushed under relentless artillery fire. Mohnke, once a commander of elite divisions like the Leibstandarte and Hitlerjugend, now found himself surrounded by remnants of disparate units, Volkssturm, Hitler Youth, regular army soldiers, and his few remaining loyal foreign SS volunteers. Ordered to fight to the last man, only the most fanatical among the remaining German, French, Belgian, Dutch, Danish, Latvian, Spanish and Swedish SS grenadiers were willing to see the battle through. Frenchmen from the Charlemagne Division under SS Brigadeführer Gustav Krukenberg and the Nordland Division under SS Brigadeführer Joachim Ziegler formed the last coherent Waffen-SS battle groups. Also present were several Spanish SS units under SS Standartenführer Miguel Esguerra, who were attached to Nordland. When Krukenberg led a group of his men toward Berlin, Himmler reportedly passed them in a car without even a glance, illustrating his disregard for the very foreign volunteers who had fought so loyally. To the north of Berlin, the 3rd SS Panzer Corps, once part of SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner's 11th SS Panzer Army, was tasked with launching a relief attack on the capital. Hitler himself declared that the outcome of Steiner's mission would decide Berlin's fate, but Steiner refused to comply. He later explained that the plan was pure fantasy. He simply did not have the troops or resources to carry it out. Instead, he ordered a withdrawal toward the Elbe, preferring surrender to the Americans over capture by the Soviets. When Hitler learned of this, he exploded in anger, declaring, "It's all finished, everything." Himmler too found himself disgraced. After naming himself Hitler's successor, the infuriated Führer dismissed him as a traitor. Himmler fled to Flensburg with a small contingent of guards. Meanwhile, SS Gruppenführer Hermann Fegelein, Himmler's liaison at the Chancellery, was arrested trying to flee in civilian clothes, his pockets stuffed with cash. He was executed for desertion. Despite the chaos, Mohnke's men achieved a brief tactical success on 27th April, halting a Soviet tank thrust at Potsdamer Platz. Mohnke described how the tanks, blocked by rubble, became vulnerable to close-quarters attack. but the Soviets simply pulled back and resumed shelling from afar. Krukenberg, operating out of the Stadtmitte U-Bahn station, reported a direct artillery hit there on 27th April that killed 4 and wounded 15. The next day, Schädel was wounded by shrapnel and his leg wound turned gangrenous. French volunteers under Krukenberg and men from Ziegler's Nordland formed tank hunter squads and blocked major approaches to the Chancellery. They held positions on Friedrichstrasse, Wilhelmstrasse, and around Belle Allianceplatz. The Air Ministry, south of the Chancellery, was also held. A lone Tiger tank from Hermann von Salza provided critical cover at Potsdamer Platz. Their actions were fierce. SS Oberscharführer François Apollo and SS Unterscharführer Eugène Volo of the Charlemagne Division were awarded the Knight's Cross for destroying 14 Soviet tanks. Both were later killed. SS Obersturmführer Wilhelm Weber, a German officer, received the same honor for knocking out 8 tanks and survived the war. 4 more Frenchmen received the Iron Cross for destroying 15 tanks collectively, though many were killed before Berlin fell. Krukenberg recalled that by the end, half of his troops were non-Germans, Scandinavians, Dutchmen, Frenchmen, and even a battalion of Latvians. He believed these foreign volunteers were doing much of the actual fighting while Mohnke's men stayed in reserve. But Mohnke's forces too were eventually overwhelmed. The Soviets captured the Reichstag and pushed within blocks of the Chancellery. Just 700 members of the Leibstandarte were left defending Hitler's last refuge. Nearby, the Hotel Adlon fell. Most of the Tiergarten was lost, and Potsdamer Platz was almost completely encircled. Only 17 Frenchmen held the Potsdamer railway station, and Krukenberg found the Air Ministry abandoned. In its cellars he discovered 100 Luftwaffe personnel asleep, oblivious to the carnage. In the early hours of April 30th, Mohnke was summoned to the Führer bunker. There, he briefed Hitler on the desperate situation. The Soviets were within meters in every direction. Hitler asked how long the defense could hold. Mohnke replied, "Not more than a day." To Mohnke's surprise, Hitler finally praised the Waffen-SS, saying they had fought bravely. Later that day, Hitler committed suicide. Mohnke reportedly wept, telling Krukenberg, "A blazing comet is extinguished." He tried to lead a breakout, but was captured. Krukenberg was also taken. Ziegler died of wounds. Schädel, critically injured, took his own life. Esquerra was captured, but managed to escape back to Spain. As the Soviets occupied Berlin, Nordland engineers blew up a tunnel under the Landwehr Canal to prevent Soviet infiltration through the U-Bahn. But it was too late. Berlin surrendered on the 2nd of May, yet the Waffen-SS continued to fight in other regions. On the 30th of April, SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Weidinger of the Das Reich Division was ordered to Prague. The city was on the verge of uprising. German officials, rear units and wounded were stranded. On May 5th, the Prague uprising began, and SS Obergruppenführer Karl Frank, hated for earlier atrocities, responded with brutal force. Nearly 3,000 Czechs were killed. Ironically, early in the fighting, Czech insurgents were supported by elements of the pro-Nazi Russian Liberation Army. These soldiers, hoping to win Allied favour, eventually fled with the SS as the Red Army arrived. Weidinger's Kampfgruppe reached Prague on the 6th of May. Ordered to crush the revolt, his progress was slow. Streets were barricaded and every stop brought fresh ambushes. When a Czech officer tried to negotiate, Weidinger agreed only to a brief ceasefire. His priority was not victory, but evacuation. He organized a convoy of over 1,000 vehicles to rescue wounded troops, civilians, and stranded personnel. Under fire from both Czech and Soviet forces, they fought their way out. Even as Berlin fell and Nazi Germany collapsed, some in the Waffen-SS continued to fight, not for victory, that dream was long dead, but for survival. The story of the Waffen-SS is one of evolution, expansion, and controversy. From a small protective unit to a vast multinational military force, it played a significant role in many of the major campaigns of the Second World War. Its members came from across Europe, driven by a variety of motivations, political, ideological, and personal, and its battlefield record was as complex as its structure. As with many aspects of the war, the legacy of the Waffen-SS continues to be examined, debated, and re-evaluated by historians and researchers. This documentary has aimed to present a clear and comprehensive account of its history based on the available evidence and scholarship. Understanding the past in full, its facts, its contradictions, and its consequences remains essential to understanding the conflict that shaped the modern world. Thank you for watching.